Welcome back, David. I'm gonna go through your brain today on something that's almost the most important for myself first. Just because I've just finished 5 days of working on my laptop. And every single time I finish this, I usually work at different time zones than I've used to. And by the end of it, my digestion is off, my sleep is off, everything is off. So this is what I wanted to kind of dig into and kind of get your insights on electromagnetic fields, on traveling, technology, and how it burns us out. So how all these devices are affecting us and why long exposure to these things without taking breaks are causing us a lot of stress, which we know in the long run, if you expose yourself to stress for too long, is going to lead to every single chronic illness, misalignment, you name it, that can go wrong, will go wrong. So
Yeah.
tell us more about how it specifically affects human body, what is happening, and are there any takeaways that we can use in our advantage during the summer? Because that's the time of the year now. Like for me, I have my
Yeah.
recovery protocol. I go do grounding every single morning, every single chance I have a break, I'll do these many things. I just want you to like dissect for somebody who's having a similar setup, travels a lot. Hey, I'm gonna go to Spain. I'm gonna go to Mexico. I'm gonna go 5, 10 hour flight here and there, and then sit all day on a beach on a phone. Might not be the best
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. So a couple things, right? Let's talk about like how it's going to affect you. Number one, let's put the time zone shift thing off to the side for just a moment. And let's talk about the act of remote work, travel, et cetera, those types of things, right? So a couple things. Those are all going to be dehydrating cells in nature, right? So that's the first thing, like at the very top of the list. The reasons why are multifactorial. There's going to be the actual electromagnetic fields interacting with you. So think of a microwave dehydrating whatever you put in it. That is a direct way that you're going to be dehydrated. The other way that you're going to be dehydrated is travel related. That's going to be you're just ungrounded. You're not able to get any. You're basically in a metal tube, and everybody's got their Wi-Fi on and Starlink and et cetera going on. So those are the things that are going to disrupt cells at the cellular level. But that's temporary, right? If as soon as you move like you land and you're at your destination or back home or whatever have you, what that's going to entail is that stimulus then ends. That does not mean all of a sudden you're hydrated again. It just means there's no continual dehydration going on. So one of the best things that you can do for mitigating the actual travel component, right, is going to be proper hydration. Now, that can entail several different things, right? If you're a very healthy individual, it might not mean anything super special other than making sure that you're getting electrolytes in you and making sure that you get extra water during, so before, during, and after the travel event.
Any
That
specific
water,
water, any specific electrolytes, or is there anything
yeah. So
we need
now
to
we're going to
consider?
talk about, okay, that's broad level what you want to do. How do you enhance the ability to hydrate back? The most effective way would be an IV administration, right? Either before flight or after the flight. Some people might not have access to that and that sort of stuff. So the next best really effective way to do this is deuterium depleted water. And then the last tier is just good high quality water that doesn't have chlorine. So spring water of any kind, bottled spring water. Ideally not in plastic, right? If you can afford it, a glass version of some kind of spring water. The spring water that I would choose would be like some kind of mineral water, Perrier, Pellegrino, things of that nature are going to be high quality, usually glass bottles, etc. The electrolytes, you want to focus heavily on a sodium based electrolyte, something with a lot of sodium. They can have, potassium and other minerals in it, just residual, but a sodium heavy electrolyte. There's lots of them out there. LMNT, Redmond sea salt, Celtic sea salt, electrolyte mixes. Any of those are going to be what you want to focus on while the travel is happening, right? Another thing is you probably want to consume less food in the air. The reason for that is not going to be processed the same as when you're hydrated. So it could lead to stomach disruptions. It can lead to just digestion being off, etc. So what I like to focus on, like say it's a 10-hour day of travel, right? Early in the morning before going to the airport, you have a big meal, essentially somewhere close to 50% of your calories, right? That you're going to have for that day. And it's okay to undereat. It's totally fine. One day of undereating is not going to kill anybody. But I would say you'd want to get
So
close to 50.
you're gonna have a struggle here with a buy-in for someone who flies business class and you have three meal courses every few hours
Oh,
and
I know. I know.
everything like that.
I would tell them get you some high quality water. The worst thing you can do, right? Besides food, the worst thing that you could do is alcohol. Alcohol in a
Reducing
flight. Yeah, alcohol if you're like, I'm just really hungry or whatever, right? Fine. Eat something light. Keep it protein based, keep it not a lot of high carbohydrate. Make sure that you salt the food. Make sure that you get plenty of water in you. But the absolute worst thing that I would say, do not do this while flying, is drinking alcohol. That will significantly alter to a worse state the nature of cellular dehydration. Um, the second worst would be excessive caffeine consumption.
that.
That's going to do actually two things. It's going to disrupt your circadian mechanism even more because you're going to lower adenosine. So when you land, you're not even really going to like catch up on sleep, if you will, because you've blocked the adenosine receptor, and it also dehydrates you to a greater extent when you're flying. So those would be, as far as like things to consume and things not to consume. That's how I would view that list in terms of travel. Um, then once you land, right, things that can accelerate the healing or the remediation from the travel would be as follows: IV administration, if possible.
Before you go
Let's say,
to recovery, I want to kind of get to what's actually is harming you when you are flying. Like
yeah,
what's happening
yeah,
there?
yeah. So let's talk about that. There's the effect of the actual electromagnetic field of what's on the airplane, all the gadgets, all the Wi-Fi, the other 100 people on the plane that have their Wi-Fi on as well. So you're basically in a big microwave, right? So that's the obvious one. But another one that people don't think about is actually being closer to or having less atmosphere between you and the sun. So you're going to get excessive radiation from the sun. You're going to get gamma rays. You're going to get more gamma rays. You're going to get more electromagnetic fields directly from the sun. So you're going to get exposure. And this is actually demonstrated in pilots. Pilots have a higher rate of cancer outcomes twofold. Number one, they're always close to the instruments. And number two, they are always in the air. That's their job. So they get excess radiation that way. Now, it's temporary, like I mentioned. Once you get back down to earth, you're not receiving that excess radiation. So the hours logged is a big deal in my book. Like if you're going to be traveling a lot, you should also you should try to do it in one of two ways. It's kind of like training, right? If you trained every single day, you'd quickly run into too much stress. But if you give yourself recovery periods, you're going to be able to ameliorate that stress. Traveling should be thought of in that way. The problem is the stress isn't hormetic, meaning you're not going to get better at traveling by traveling strategically, right? It's always a negative. But coupling that, like say you have like, um, you know, let's hypothetically say you frequent places that require a 10-hour travel day, right, in the air. Then that would mean that I would go out of my way to do that sparingly, meaning at the most a 10-hour travel day every third week would be like high frequency. But that gives you
Like
two
I did
weeks.
for a couple of years, and every 2 weeks, 10, 12. I think one flight was 30 hours. And we know my blood tests were all over the place.
Yeah, yeah. That level of travel, it really messes with people because there just isn't enough time to recover from the subsequent travels, right? So if you can spread it out further, so let's say a 10-hour flight every month, that would be possible to ameliorate if when you're not in the air, you're doing some of the things that we'll talk about in terms of recovery from it. But yes, so it's one of those things where you're just accumulating way more radiation than you ever will on the ground because you're getting exposure from the atmospheric radiation as well as all the normal stuff that you would be exposed to, say, in an apartment building, right? But even
For
closer.
somebody who is traveling a lot, what would be like a low-end tech that they could use to track that, hey, my body is getting through a bit too much stress? So for me personally, I don't even need tech when my digestion goes off. I'm like, my body started under too much stress. For
Yeah, well,
like a blood
so
pressure monitor or
there's
something
a couple
like that.
things. There's a couple things. Um, the inability to sleep correctly when you're not uh traveling. So like all of a sudden your clocks get thrown off, your circadian clocks get thrown off to the point where you struggle to sleep or you struggle to wake up. Something affecting your sleep is going to be one or two, right?
And when you
Uh,
say affecting your sleep, everyone loves gadgets now. Uh, those gadgets we know can affect your sleep as well. But if you don't want to put those gadgets aside, what would you look for there? Would you look for REM sleep, deep sleep
yeah,
latency?
if you had the gadgets, I would say your REM sleep's going to get affected big time. So it
When
will
that starts to go
definitely,
down, it's like,
yeah,
dude, you need to put your gadgets
yeah,
aside.
especially and you would compare it to a time when you weren't traveling.
Mm.
Right? That's the only comparison you can do. You can't compare it to the last 3 weeks or the last 2 weeks or the going forward 2 or 3 weeks. You got to compare it to a time when you had like a couple months of no travel. What was your REM sleep there? That's what I would compare it to. The other thing is sleep efficiency, right? Um, how long do you toss and turn to try to get to sleep? Um, and then the other one would be when you wake up, do you wake up groggy and you feel like you need caffeine or you need stimulants to fully wake up? That's telling us that you are not effectively recovering during sleep, the sleep that you might be getting. So even if you don't have a gadget, those are things that you can, how am I tossing and turning for 20, 30 minutes in bed trying to fall asleep? I can't fall asleep. You need to take pills for sleeping, that sort
My
of stuff.
sleep latency is 1 minute.
Right, right. Um, so if that doesn't change, that's actually kind of a good sign that your body at least can cope with that level of stress. But if it's too much, that might suffer. Or on the flip side, when you're waking up, that will suffer. You wake up extra groggy. You really feel not really ready for the day unless you have caffeine, that sort of stuff. The other thing is going, like you mentioned, that either becomes number one for people if they're more neurologically drained, or digestion. One of those two things messes up. Now, when I say digestion, that could be, constipation, that could be diarrhea. It can be either one of those that you normally don't get unless you travel. And then the next thing would be um, an aberrant, incontrollable um, need for food, meaning
Mm.
food that you normally wouldn't eat starts to feel more appealing and almost like you want to eat it, like sweets and garbage food. You'll get that feeling because the body is drained of energy and it's looking for quick fuel, right? So that's another concept to kind of go along with the whole how does travel and tech use or like being crammed in a can with 100 other people using their cell phones, how does that affect you and make you're essentially losing energy every minute that you're in the air. You are losing energy. So things that you can do, I think this is kind of an appropriate time, things that you can do to not suffer that consequence or those consequences in general are pre-hydration, pre-ground. So like if you know you're going to be traveling and you have the ability the day before to get an IV, to get a little bit of extra time outside before you're going to be getting on the plane, that would be the appropriate time to use something like nicotine gum or nicotine itself, combined with a little bit of methylene blue or anything that
So
donates
what
electrons.
time of the day would you use that? Because that now becomes a bit of a edgy.
I would use it the morning before travel. So let's say you're traveling on a Friday, Thursday morning, I would administer the methylene blue and nicotine that morning. I would pair that with natural sun exposure or infrared therapy slash UV therapy. And then, later that evening or that afternoon, if possible, deuterium depleted water or IV administration of fluids. The next day is travel day. If you're doing the deuterium depleted water, that's when you would take more deuterium depleted water. Make the majority of the water that you're going to drink that morning. Have your big meal that you're going to have before the travel, and then that's also when I would administer a second dose of methylene blue.
And
If
this
you're
is just so people kind of catch up with what you're talking about is to improve your mitochondrial efficiency so you have more energy because otherwise you're going to be depleted and drained and
yeah,
experience jet lag on a higher level.
yeah. So the methylene blue in this particular scenario is going to do two things. It's going to donate electrons to the electron transport chain. So you're going to ameliorate the losing energy part, right? Because you're going to be donating electrons. Then the other thing that methylene blue is going to do while you're in the air is because it donates electrons, it's going to make it so that your mitochondria can continue to make cellular water. So it's going to combat the dehydration effect. And then the other thing that it does is it takes iron. Iron exists in two forms in your body. It's called the +3 state, which makes it magnetic. It's paramagnetic, makes it magnetic to oxygen, which means it holds oxygen, but it doesn't release it. That's what happens when you sleep or when you are in a large electromagnetic field that's non-native. So meaning an airplane, right? Or, in an office building where you're not getting sunlight. The thing that changes that iron state from a +3 to a +2, which means now it can release oxygen, is sunlight. Sunlight does it, UV light specifically, and methylene blue. Methylene blue actively changes the oxidation state of iron. So it takes it from a +3, which means you cannot release oxygen into the bloodstream or into the mitochondria from the bloodstream, to a +2. Now you're releasing oxygen into the mitochondria. So that's two ways that it amplifies that. The other thing that it's going to do is once you land, or because we're talking about an extended flight, somewhere around 10 hours or more, when you land, you're probably going to want to take a third administration of methylene blue. Why? Because methylene blue also binds to cytochrome 4, which is a red light chromophore. That's where mitochondrial water is going to be made, and that's where electrons are going to be pulled. It amplifies, because it's a blue dye, it is a red light chromophore. So it's going to amplify how much infrared light the body can absorb at cytochrome 4. So when you land,
And now it sounds like you need to be outside as well to just make it more efficient.
when you land, the first thing you want to do, irrelevant of where you land, the first thing you want to do, if it's nighttime, you just want to ground. You just want to get outside, get some grounding in. 20 minutes, 30 minutes. If it's during the day, that's when you would want to at least book some time for yourself, like an hour, where you can ground and get some daylight, right? It doesn't matter if it's cloudy or not, because red light, remember what I said about methylene blue, it's amplifying red light absorption. Red light exists year round all over the globe, no matter where you're at, even on a cloudy day, right? So even on a rainy day, right? You would want to get, maybe a covered balcony somewhere outside where you're getting actual daylight interacting with your body. The other thing that you could do, say you're traveling and you're going from Europe to, I don't know, the Netherlands, right? So you're moving further north, so the sun's going to be weaker in those countries. geothermal, right? So going for a sauna or going for a geothermal bath, those are a way to collect infrared light. Because remember, infrared light is also heat. So essentially, a sauna session. Now, this is where you got to make sure that you've done the prerequisites. That's why I started pre-flight. If you're hydrated correctly and you've been hydrating correctly, when you land, you're already hydrated. So that means that you have excess water in the body. That's what you're trying to achieve. You're trying to achieve a hyper hydrated state before the flight. Stay as hydrated as possible during the flight, and when you land, you're already hydrated. Water is a red light chromophore. So red light therapy, sunlight therapy, a geothermal sauna session, any of those types of therapies are going to enhance the effect of hyperhydrating you back up and ameliorating the stress that you suffered from the flight. It's also going to reset some, depending on the time of day that you land, right? Say you land early morning, wherever you're going to land. That's going to also set the clocks for, hey, it's daytime. I need to be awake for the rest of the day. And you'll get a surge of energy if you get daylight exposure early morning when you land. And that kind of sets you up for proper sleep that night, right? Wherever the new time zone is. So, um, that's how I would go about the mitigation of that. Now, as far as now, let's talk about time zone shifting, right? If you're moving backwards in time zone, meaning when you land, it's earlier in the day that you left. Does that make sense? That this gets a little, time travel, time zone changes get a little bit tricky to talk about. But let's say you're in Europe, right, and you're going to the U.S. When you land in the U.S., you're probably going to land earlier or at the same time that you left on the same day. Does that make sense? Right? If you left the UK on Friday morning, 10 hours later, you land in the US, it's still Friday morning, right? If you're going in that direction, you don't really need to do much. You're going to feel a little bit tired, but you're going to land earlier in the day. So as long as you get the same signal, the body's going to understand, oh, it's still early in the day. We still need to run a little bit longer, and it'll amplify protein, enzymes, et cetera, to kind of keep everything running. And then you just make sure that when you get to your sleeping quarters, whether it's a hotel or an Airbnb or whatever, this is where I would have a couple very useful things to travel with, right? These are useful tools. Blackout curtains, right? The type that, fold up in your luggage and stuff. I would ensure that you can black out anything and everything in the sleeping room that you're going to be in. The next thing that I would always bring with me is just some black electrical tape, because everywhere that you go these days, there's LED clocks, there's LED lights everywhere, blinking all over, especially in hotel rooms, and you'd want to cover them all up. You would want zero light in the sleeping quarters. So any type of tool, blackout curtains, electrical tape are handy to just have in your luggage, so that you can ensure that wherever you're going to sleep that night, at least it's black. The next thing that would be also useful is like a cooling pad, like the gel cooling pads that you can put in the fridge or put in the freezer. I would mainly do it because there's some for like your face and your neck, and your head. Those would be extremely useful too, so that you can cool the brain, cool the blood right before going to bed, so that you bump up sleep efficiency and melatonin release.
Hmm.
And if you're really anal, I tend to travel with my little detector, so I can go around the room and unplug things and stuff like that. I go out of my way to do that. And the reason for that is the same concept. It's just with light that you can't see, right? You want to ensure that light is not interacting with you at all once you go to bed in that new time zone, so that you can properly set the wake and sleep cycles for the body as soon as possible. If you're going backwards the other direction, so if you're going from like the US to the UK, you leave the US, right? 10 hours later you land, you've actually landed the next day now in wherever you're going to land. That sometimes works in your favor if you plan the flights accordingly, right? If you're going to leave if I was going to travel in that direction, what I would do is I would try to travel during the night, so that when you land wherever you're going to land, you're landing in the morning, and then you don't have to do much, right? Then it's just a matter of when you land, try to get some sleep on the flight, etc. You're probably not going to get much, but when you wake up, you get some daylight exposure. It's going to be morning there, so you're going to be able to initiate those processes just by getting outside and being active during that day. I would, and then same concept when you go to bed that I just talked about. Now, if you're landing in the afternoon, right? So, like, say you left, LA or something like that early that morning, and you're landing in the UK in the afternoon, then the thing that becomes priority is cold exposure and ensuring that nighttime the nighttime area, the nighttime bedroom that you're going to be sleeping in is 100% pitch black, and you would want some way to get cold exposure. In that particular case, cryo, cold plunging, the cooling mask, all of those become more priority than getting outside, right? So essentially at night, it's maybe get a little bit of grounding. It's a bonus. It's not necessary if you can't do it, but getting really cold and ensuring that there's a black room that you're going to be able to sleep in, ideally from all visual light and all light you can't see.
So when you get all this done, what kind of measurements can you expect to improve? Maybe resting heart rate, maybe blood pressure. Is there anything that you can track to kind of like say, okay, I'm back on track? Another thing I wanted to ask is what kind of IV infusions do we talk about? Because now you're going to go and they will give you a million options. What?
Yeah, I would keep. So let's talk about the IV. Yeah,
Could
let's talk about the IV first. It should be heavy in electrolytes. So a lactated ringer or a normal sodium would be the base that I would pick. I would not hesitate to do some glutathione and vitamin C, large amount of vitamin C, like 10 grams. Those would be the only two things that I would add. The rest, I would not add B vitamins. B vitamins are going to accelerate methylation. Methylation can accelerate mutations. You're already going to be exposed to large amounts of electromagnetic fields and large amounts of solar electromagnetic fields. Your methylation is already going to go up. Do not add B vitamins to these types of things in that scenario. You would want antioxidants and anything that can scavenge free radicals, because you're going to be making excess free radicals. So glutathione and vitamin C are the only things that I would add to a lactated ringer or a normal sodium IV bag.
Yeah, because at the moment everyone is just randomly getting assigned all kind of weird stuff, and I see all kind of stuff. And
yeah, I would keep it simple: glutathione and as much vitamin C as you can afford.
Talk about food. What kind of food can enhance recovery before going and once you land there, and what kind of food to maybe avoid to make sure that your travel is smooth sailing, so to speak? Because we both know majority of people will not avoid food at all. But if there is someone who is really struggling with their jet lag, what kind of suggestions are the best to follow to kind of try and test if they will suffer less from jet lag?
Unfortunately, the food isn't going to be more of like suffering less. It's more of not inducing more damage, right? So things that I would avoid: highly processed carbohydrates, right? So that's basically going to be soda pop, sugary drinks, even diet drinks, right? Diet drinks would probably be even more harmful because most of them have aspartame in it. Those are going to demyelinate you, meaning they're going to cause melanin stores to be dumped into dopamine. So those would be the main things I would not eat. So that goes along with the conversation of alcohol and coffee. Any soda drinks, I would stick to water or water with lemon, things of that nature. Not any of those. In terms of food, I would not, have candy bars, protein bars, those types of things. If you have, like you mentioned, you have in-flight service and whatever, I would stick to the protein sources and I would stick to the vegetable sources, and I would make sure that I can put plenty of salt on them.
Mhm.
Those would be like, if there was things that I would say, okay, I'm gonna have to eat. What am I gonna eat? Protein sources, vegetable sources with lots of sodium on them so that you can keep hydration going. And if it is available, things like rice, any natural food, whole food, if you want to call it that, carbohydrate, that would be rice, that would be potatoes. That's kind of really the only thing that you're going to find on a flight that you're going to be able to eat that's not processed to the point where it's actually going to be damaging.
Yeah, because majority of times, if you have 16-hour flight, it's gonna be tough to survive without food. And more often than not, what people do is they grab protein bars and stuff like that.
Yeah. Here's a hack, right? Now, again, this is a hack. This is only like, for example, if you have traveled, and most people that are probably going to be listening to this or are in this situation have traveled enough that they know what kind of goes wrong. You mentioned for you it's digestion usually, that kind of goes off. If you know that it's a digestion thing, then I would go out of my way to avoid food. Here's the hack. This is where strategic use of a GLP-1 comes in incredibly, incredibly handy. You would dose it the night before flying, and you would be able to essentially fast for 16 hours, no problem. And in the time, right, it's not going to inhibit your ability to eat if you take it correctly and you know what you're doing. It's just going to make it incredibly easy not to eat if you choose to not to eat, right? So that is a hack that I do employ with people that fly frequently and know that their digestion is the weak link in the first one of the first things that gets affected when they do a lot of flying is
Yeah,
strategic use
for me,
of
digestion
GLP-1.
wouldn't be necessarily just from flight. It would be if I do 5, 6, 7 days of doing what I usually do, no sun
Mm-hmm.
exposure, no good food, eating
Yeah.
at weird times compared to what I usually do. It's usually
Yeah.
day 5, 6 where I
Yeah.
start to
So
feel.
that's where, and again, there's studies on this, right? Where they show benefit of, hey, one 24-hour fast in a week can reset the digestive tract. And that's essentially what's going on, right? When what you just described is a miscommunication of when food is supposed to come in and a misoptimization of digestion, right? So your body kind of gets stuck in this limbo of what do we digest, what don't we digest, what can we wait to digest, etc. Because it can't do everything at once. There needs to be periods where the digestive tract doesn't do anything so that it can shed lining and shed cells and put new. I mean, people don't know this, but your digestive tract is basically turning over most of its cell lining every 48 hours, right? But if you start,
This is super important because like a lot of people are just so caught up with like calories in, calories out, and you're like, it at my size specifically, it's way more complex and it requires way more precision than just
yeah,
hitting calories. If
yeah,
you're a
yeah.
60
So
kilo kid, yeah, you go for it. You count your calories and nothing's gonna happen.
yeah, 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 100%. So that is where I would say if digestion, this goes back to, right now I can only give you broad level things to kind of pinpoint, but if somebody's working with me and they travel a lot, the first thing I want to know is what gets affected the most. Is it digestion and just dysregularity with that, or is it mental, right? Sleep gets more. Remember how I said one of two things are going to be affected the most depending on the person: sleep and grogginess and neurotransmitters and that sort of thing, or the digestion side of thing. Sometimes both, but usually one gets prioritized to get let go of more. Depending on that situation, depends on some of the hacks that you might use. For the digestion problem, that's where a GLP-1 would be extremely handy for being able to essentially, because see, think of it this way: the scenario where you go from LA to the UK and you land in the morning, if you are able to fast that whole time, you've essentially gone through a pseudo nighttime, even though you might not get very much sleep. So when you land right in the morning, your gut clocks are primed and ready to digest food, and you don't suffer any consequence. You see what I'm saying? That's how you have to think about it. The food ingestion should match what you're trying to accomplish with your sleep. If you're trying to induce a pseudo sleep while you fly, you're going to want to try to fast for the majority of that so that your gut clocks, when you land, are primed and ready for digestion, and not trying to figure out should they be digestion or should there not be digestion going on, that sort of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for well, majority of people, it's kind of, hey, I'm flying business class and I'm wasting all this good food and this and that. And you're like, yeah, but it's gonna take away 2 days of your life just to recover from the stuff that you're going through because you're being a bit greedy pig.
Yeah, essentially, right? Especially if you know that your digestion is the thing that's going to get messed up, right? And if you also know, like for you, digestion is incredibly important, right? Like, because if you can't digest your food, you're not going to be able to feel well and everything, because you have a large engine on your body that requires a lot of fucking fuel, right? Sorry for the swearing, but you're just going to need the fuel there. And if it's not there, your brain won't work well, right?
Yeah.
So if you're in that boat, you need to think about digestion as almost as a priority to sleep, right? So that's where you start formulating specific strategies. For the neurological side, there are other things like strategic melatonin use, things of that nature, so that you can recover neurotransmitters well. Even in this particular case, I would go out of my way to maybe even go to a tanning bed or a light therapy session, if you're arriving at weird hours of the night and that sort of stuff, depending on exactly the time that you're arriving. So it gets a little bit more intricate because you got to know the schedule, right? The schedule dictates how you should use the
Yeah.
protocol.
So it's always comes to you need to be specifically figuring out what works for you, what doesn't work for you. So doing a blood test before and after would be great to kind of have some kind of a setup that you can monitor if it changes or not. Uh,
Yeah.
Majority of time, if you travel from, let's say, Europe west towards Mexico, America, whatever, you might not have any issues whatsoever, but you need to be a bit more careful when you come back.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what majority of people usually report. Oh, I came back to UK and I feel groggy and I feel this and I feel that. You can overcome that with what you described, a little bit of methyl and blue before flying, grounding, all those kind of things, maybe fast throughout your flight. So when you come back, your body is essentially at the starting point and you just reset everything and then carry on with your life instead
Mm-hmm.
of putting your body through more stress because you're already on a flight. Your body is getting bombarded from every single side there is, whilst it tries to do what you usually do, like digest food and think and all those kind of things. But in reality, you could take away that stress of eating food, thinking, and all that kind of stuff. Just sleep throughout the flight
Mm-hmm.
and take a couple hours to reset yourself through grounding, red light, you name
Mm-hmm.
it, all those metal and blue and all those kind of things, and you'll feel 10 times better. But the main things that you kind of pointed out is everyone will be very different.
Yeah, yeah. There will be
Observation.
significant difference, and the timing of the flight, like when you're landing, what time of day it's going to be when you land, what time of day it is when you left. Those dictate should you shift your clocks forward or should you shift your clocks back. And depending on what strategy you decide is best, for the flight schedule that you have, that will dictate whether you're going to use GLP-1 or whether you're going to use melatonin or whether you're going to emphasize cold exposure when you're going to land or whether you're going to emphasize daytime exposure, right?
And I want to kind of link it into what I was describing, that I usually every 6 weeks, sometimes a bit more frequent, I do these 5 to 6 to 7 to 10 day events where I don't sleep, don't eat, don't have sun exposure. So from what I get from this would be ideal. Okay, get your first 2 3 days in a similar routines that you're doing, and then
Uh-huh.
maybe last couple days try to fast, try to do
Uh-huh.
more grounding, try to do more sun exposure wherever you can. And
Mhm.
last 3 4 days, if you do, let's say, a little bit of extended fast, you're not going to feel as bad as I usually would at the end of it, where my digestion starts to suffer and it takes me around 5 to 7 days to recover from it.
Yeah, and in that particular scenario, methylene blue use in the second half of that event would be beneficial because you're getting poor level. Think of it like it's the same scenario as the plane flight, but the plane flight, all the damage is happening in 10 hours. In
Right.
your scenario of like inside, it's being extended over days and days. There might not be as much electromagnetic fields, so the effect doesn't really get felt until halfway through the 7 week period, or 7 day period, I should say. So that's when you would use methylene blue, maybe starting the middle of that transition period where you know you're going to start suffering from low energy, low electron flow. That's when I would focus on, hey, maybe in the middle of this, I can schedule an IV therapy session and get some glutathione and some vitamin C, and take a little bit of methylene blue for the remaining 2 or 3 days. And then that's going to hyperhydrate you for those 2 or 3 days. And then when the event ends, that's when you go all in and do a full day of just sun exposure, some grounding, or as much as you can anyway, and possibly end with another IV therapy session.
Well, I'm definitely going to try it out for next event, so and report back on you. But I appreciate your time, David. I know I need to let you off, and we'll go deeper in next video.
Awesome. Thank you.